All right, let's dive into the story of a book from 400 years ago that started a nationwide craze. And get this, it wasn't some epic novel or a book of poetry. Nope. It was a math textbook. And its story, I promise you, will totally change the way you think about numbers.
I mean, just think about that for a second. Could a book full of equations and word problems actually capture the imagination of an entire country? We're talking everyone from farmers to kids to merchants. It sounds impossible, right?
Well, it happened. Back in the 1600s in Japan, this one book, the Jinkoki, did exactly that. It was so much more than a textbook. It became this huge cultural moment that literally reshaped an entire society.
To really get the Jinkoki, you gotta stop thinking of it as some dusty old school book. This thing was the blockbuster of its day. Seriously, it was the book that everyone had to have. The genius of this book was just how modern it was. Its popularity was like the Harry Potter phenomenon, a total craze. The way it engaged people with puzzles, think Brain Age on the Nintendo DS, but for the 17th century. And its format, which was packed with illustrations and stories, was basically the original infographic. This book was revolutionary. So the big question is, why then? What was happening in the world that created the perfect storm for a math book to become a bestseller? Well, the answer is that Japan was going through this massive societal shift. It was moving from an era of constant war to an era of peace. You have to understand, for more than 100 years, Japan had been stuck in a brutal civil war. In that world, being a great swordsman was what mattered. But when peace finally came, the rules of the game totally changed. It wasn't about being the strongest anymore. Now it was about being the smartest, the one who could calculate, plan, and, make a profit. And all of a sudden, everybody was facing these brand new kinds of problems in their daily lives. A merchant had to figure out profit margins. A farmer had to measure their land to pay taxes correctly. A builder had to calculate exactly how much lumber to dye. Math wasn't some abstract thing for scholars anymore. It was a skill you needed just to survive and get ahead. And this is where our hero, Yoshida Mitsuyoshi, comes into the picture. He was born into a wealthy family and was just fascinated by mathematics, but he had this powerful idea. This knowledge shouldn't be locked away in an ivory tower. He saw himself as a mathematics evangelist, and he was on a mission to bring the power of numbers to the people. So how did he pull it off? How on earth did he make math, of all things, something that everyone actually wanted to learn? Well, his book, the Jinkoku, had this kind of secret sauce, and it was based on 3 totally brilliant ideas. Okay, so Yoshida's whole approach boiled down to 3 key things. First, he made math visual, connecting it to the real world. Second, he made it fun, turning studying into a game. And third, he made it for everyone, breaking down the walls between social classes. Let's break each of these down, because this is where the magic really happens. Before the Jinkoki, math books were just these dense, intimidating blocks of text. Yoshida changed all that. He filled his book with pictures of everyday life. So instead of an abstract equation, you'd see a drawing of rice bales, and the problem would be right there, in a context you understood. This visual approach was amazing because it meant even a kid who maybe couldn't read that well could still get hooked by the problem. Next up, Yoshida basically gamified learning. He knew that people just love a good challenge. So he packed the Jinkoki with brain teasers and mathematical riddles. You can just imagine families gathering around at night, working together to try and solve these puzzles. Math stopped being a chore and actually became family entertainment. Here's a super famous example. You've got some cranes and some turtles. You know there are 10 heads in total and 28 legs. So how many of each animal are there? It's a classic logic puzzle, right? And what it does is it forces you to think about 2 different variables to find one answer. It's basically teaching you algebraic thinking without ever using the scary word algebra. But the most legendary puzzle of all was one that was designed to completely and utterly blow the reader's mind. It was called Nezumi-zan, which means the mouse calculation. And it was an unforgettable lesson in one of the most powerful forces in the entire universe. So here's the problem. In January, a pair of mice has 12 babies. In February, the original pair and those 12 babies all have their own litters of 12. And this cycle continues every single month for a year. So, take a guess. How many mice do you think you'd have by the end of December? A few thousand? Maybe a million?
The answer is over 27 billion. No, that is not a typo.
27,682,000,000 and change. It's a number that's so massive, it's almost impossible to even wrap your head around.
And that was the whole point. This wasn't just some trick question. It was a powerful, unforgettable way to teach the concept of exponential growth, a concept that governs everything from how a virus spreads to how your retirement savings can grow. After seeing a problem like that, you'd never, ever forget that lesson.
And that brings us to the third and maybe the most important part of the revolution, making math accessible to everybody. The Jinkoki sold so ridiculously well that the market was flooded with pirated editions. It became the go-to textbook in schools for commoners, which spread numeracy across every single level of society. This democratization of knowledge was huge. It literally built the intellectual foundation that allowed Japan to modernize so rapidly centuries later.
So, what can a 400-year-old math book really teach us today? Well, its legacy is surprisingly relevant. It touches on the very nature of what knowledge is and who it's for.
You know, the name Jinkoki itself is incredibly deep. It comes from Buddhist terms. Jin means dust, representing the infinitely small, the microscopic. And ko, or kalpa, is this almost impossibly long stretch of time, basically heading towards eternity. So the title itself is saying that mathematics is the language of the entire universe, from the tiniest particle to the vastness of time itself.
Ultimately, that was Yoshida's real message. He wanted to share the pure joy that comes from figuring things out for yourself, that feeling of power and satisfaction you get when you use logic and numbers to truly understand the world around you. And that brings us to a really important question for our own time. In an age where we have calculators in our pockets and AI that can answer anything, have we started to lose that fundamental number sense? Can we still feel the difference between a million and a billion? Do we really grasp the power of exponential growth, the way those Jinky-Wonky readers did with the mouse calculation? I think the lesson from the Jinkoki is that mathematical thinking isn't just about getting the right answer on a test. It's about building the power to think critically, to solve complex problems, and to really understand the systems that shape our worlds. And in an age of big data and so much disinformation, that skill has never been more important.